My lords, ladies and gentlemen, it is my most sorrowful duty to announce the death of my beloved mother, the Queen. For years, the royal family kept many secrets. But now, in a moment that stunned even palace insiders, Prince Edward has spoken out about Princess Diana. His words have reportedly left King Charles shaken and emotional. Edward has long been the quiet royal, content to stay in the shadows of his older siblings. But this time, his voice broke through the silence. It wasn't just a comment. It was a reckoning, arriving as the monarchy struggles to project unity and modern relevance. His remarks have reopened emotional wounds, revealed hidden truths, and placed Charles in a deeply vulnerable position. Edward has always been the quiet observer in the House of Windsor. Not the future king, not the scandal maker, not the media favorite. As the youngest son of Queen Elizabeth II, he preferred to work behind the scenes, choosing duty over drama. Now that long silence has ended, exposing a fracture in the royal family no one expected. This rift was not between brothers or spouses, but between the past and the present, between the memory of Diana and the reign of Charles. In a rare interview with a respected royal biographer, Edward reflected on Diana, saying she was more misunderstood inside the palace than by the press. That single remark reportedly sent shockwaves through Buckingham Palace. Though Edward never directly criticized his brother, the implication was enough. Sources say Charles took the words to heart, especially after decades spent trying to rebuild his image following Diana's death. And it wasn't just what Edward said, it was when he said it. With the monarchy still recovering from Harry and Meghan's explosive claims and public skepticism toward Camilla as queen, Edward's comments reopened a wound many had tried to close. Behind closed doors, aides say Charles was visibly unsettled, particularly because the words came from the one royal who had always remained silent. It wasn't betrayal, it was truth. And that truth could reshape how the world remembers both Diana and Charles. For decades, Edward stayed loyal in the background, avoiding the scandals and attention that consumed his siblings. While Charles managed divorces and the crown, Andrew faced disgrace, and Anne endured with quiet resilience, Edward chose stillness, until now. For years, Edward remained quiet when it came to Diana. During her time in the royal family, he avoided public commentary on her struggles or her fame. Yet those close to the palace say he was far more attentive than anyone realized. Staff recall instances where Edward defended her intentions in private and questioned how the institution handled her mental health and media scrutiny. But before we continue, we'd love for you to hit the subscribe button if you're enjoying this video. If you just did, we truly appreciate it. Now, let's get back to the main content. Why wait nearly 3 decades to speak? According to royal commentator Penny Jr., Edward believed that any remarks he made would be seen as disloyal or self-serving. He worried about adding fuel to the fire or being swept into tabloid speculation. But with the monarchy now under King Charles, he reportedly felt some truths needed to be heard. Not for scandal, but for respect. Edward once said that Diana was the only one who tried to humanize the royal family when it felt least human. The remark not only honored her legacy, but also challenged the way the institution once viewed her. It was brief, measured, and deeply intentional, proof that a few quiet words could carry extraordinary weight. Coming from someone known for restraint and loyalty, the effect was profound. It reignited conversations long buried under protocol and tradition. For Charles, it was more than an unexpected comment. It was a reminder that Diana's influence still lingers, and perhaps most powerfully when voiced by her own family. Though the public seldom saw Edward and Diana together, palace insiders say they shared an unspoken understanding. Unlike his brothers, Edward never sought the spotlight or resented her growing popularity. Diana is said to have once remarked that Edward was the only one who never made her feel like she was a problem. Their connection came from a shared sense of being on the fringes. Diana, a young bride facing the pressures of monarchy, often felt isolated. Edward, the youngest sibling, knew what it was to be overlooked. During her most difficult moments, her separation from Charles, the controversial Panorama interview, her humanitarian missions, Edward is remembered for quietly offering support, visiting her away from cameras and public view. It wasn't a friendship of grand gestures, but of quiet understanding. His loyalty, unspoken for years, may have been the most telling tribute of all. And now, with his recent comments, it's clear that the respect and compassion he had for Diana ran far deeper than the world imagined. For Charles, those words, calmly spoken, landed with the force of a storm. They carried an accusation wrapped in sorrow, one that cut more sharply than any headline. According to palace insiders, Charles never imagined Edward would be the one to bring Diana back into the public conversation, especially in a way that stirred fresh sympathy for her, and at his expense. While Edward avoided speaking negatively about his brother, the meaning beneath his words was clear. It was as though he was asking the world to take another look at Diana's pain, and by doing so, inevitably reconsider Charles's part in it. Those close to the king say he was deeply unsettled, canceling public appearances for an entire day after the remarks were released. Charles has spent years trying to transform his public image from that of the man who let Diana down into a respected, steady monarch. But this moment tore open old emotional wounds, made worse because of who it came from. It wasn't the press, a tell-all book, or a television drama. It was family. And in a world where public perception shapes everything, Edward's words, delivered with restraint, cut all the more sharply because they came from inside the royal circle. Beneath the titles and ceremonies stands a man still wrestling with the shadows of his past. Known for his composure, Charles reportedly struggled to contain his emotions after hearing Edward's comments. Sources describe him withdrawing from meetings, appearing pale, quiet, and unusually reserved in the hours that followed. To him, this was not a passing remark. It was the reopening of a wound he has worked decades to heal. Charles's relationship with Diana was complicated, intense, and fraught with personal regrets. Over the years, he has worked to reshape his public legacy through his marriage to Camilla, his environmental campaigns, and his dedication to public service. But framing Diana in such a compassionate light risks undoing that progress, at least in the eyes of the public. Privately, Charles has long believed that people misunderstood the complexity of his marriage, seeing two people ill-suited to each other thrown into an unforgiving spotlight. Edward's statement, however, suggested that the institution, and therefore Charles, bore responsibility for Diana's suffering. That's not a tabloid's accusation. It's a family member's. And in the fragile balance of royal life, the deepest cuts often come from within. In the aftermath, Queen Camilla faced a familiar challenge, caught in the middle of a storm she didn't create. Publicly, she remained silent, but behind palace doors she was a steady presence, helping Charles manage his emotions. Over the years, she has carefully worked to shift public perception, moving from the image of the other woman to a legitimate queen consort, all while knowing Diana's shadow has never truly faded. This latest chapter only intensified that shadow. Insiders say Camilla urged Charles to remain calm and refrain from any public comment, warning that even a measured royal response would fuel the story. She's well aware that whenever Diana's name is invoked, hers inevitably follows. Edward's comments may not have mentioned her directly, but the implications stirred familiar questions about her role in Diana's life, her mental health, and her public image. That scrutiny is nothing new to Camilla. What's different this time is the source, a member of the family once seen as a quiet ally. Camilla is often underestimated, but those close to her say she understands the political undercurrents of royal life better than most. She knows how quickly public opinion can shift and how easily the press can twist even the softest admission from within the palace. Privately, she urged Charles to keep his focus on the present, on William, his long-term legacy, and the importance of rising above the noise. But even she couldn't shield him from the emotional weight of Edward's remarks. In a system that thrives on control, his candor was an unexpected wave. For Camilla, who once lived in Diana's shadow, it was a reminder that her presence still lingers and always will. Edward's words may have been measured, but the reaction was anything but quiet. Across social media, news outlets, and royal discussion forums, the public response was swift and intense. His statement revived sympathy for Diana and reignited scrutiny of Charles's past. For younger audiences, many of whom have learned about the royal family through dramatizations like The Crown, Edward's comments felt like confirmation of what they had long believed. Diana's suffering came not just from the press, but from the institution itself. Within hours, hashtags demanding justice for Diana trended on TikTok, while X, formerly Twitter, lit up with posts praising Edward's composure and contrasting it with the silence of the rest of the family during Diana's hardest years. What gave his statement extra weight was the fact that Edward has never been known as a provocateur. His royal role has always been steady, formal, and non-political, making his decision to speak out feel driven by conscience rather than ambition. Early polling suggests Charles's approval ratings, especially among those under 40, have taken a slight hit, while Edward's popularity has climbed, with many applauding his sincerity and moral clarity. Royal watchers believe this could shape how future generations judge the monarchy's past. It's less about gossip and more about accountability. His words validated a long-held public belief that Diana's pain was real and that the palace bore some responsibility. In a monarchy built on image, perception matters as much as protocol. Edward wasn't just speaking for himself. He gave voice to a sentiment that has grown louder over the years. The late Queen Elizabeth II maintained unity by keeping cracks hidden beneath tradition. Now, in her absence, those cracks are visible. Charles and Edward are taking different paths, Charles choosing preservation and gradual reform, Edward opting for quiet reflection and now pointed honesty. Some insiders insist Edward would never have made such remarks while the Queen was alive. Without her as a unifying force, the brothers are navigating their duties in their own ways, and that independence has exposed differences. Among those disenchanted with the monarchy, Edward's candor may carry more weight than Charles's crown. Elizabeth embodied silent strength, but Edward's understated truth-telling might represent a new kind of influence, one where transparency, not tradition, defines legacy. In a modern era where the monarchy struggles to remain relevant, that change could be profound. Royal historians are calling Edward's statement a defining moment in the post-Elizabeth era, not because of its content alone, but because of the source. It's rare for any royal to acknowledge Diana's private struggles and hint at the institution's failings. For that acknowledgement to come from Edward, the family's most reserved figure, is almost without precedent. Some believe it may even reshape the way future royal events are viewed and remembered. She explained that this moment could open the door to more honest conversations within the palace, and perhaps more openness in the years ahead. For centuries, the monarchy has relied on silence and ceremony to shape its narrative. Edward's remarks suggest that not everyone inside the royal walls accepts the official version of history. Some analysts believe this could encourage younger royals, particularly Prince Harry, to speak more freely now that Edward has broken precedent. If the monarchy hopes to withstand modern public scrutiny, many argue it will need more truth-tellers like Edward, and fewer attempts to hide uncomfortable truths. One measured sentence may have been enough to shift the ground beneath the institution. The question now is what comes next. Edward's comments have left the royal family at a crossroads, with consequences that could go beyond public perception. Inside the palace, they may prompt long-overdue discussions. Outside, they increase the pressure on King Charles to address the monarchy's past in a way that feels genuine. Royal watchers are split. Some expect Charles to keep silent, waiting for the controversy to fade. Others predict he might find subtle ways to acknowledge Diana's impact, perhaps through charitable initiatives or carefully chosen public gestures. Prince William's position is especially delicate. As both Diana's son and the heir to the throne, he may feel torn between protecting his father and honoring his mother's memory. Until now, he's balanced that tension with caution. Edward's words, however, may influence how he speaks about Diana in the future. This moment is more than a personal dispute. It's a potential turning point. The monarchy is built on stability, but true resilience might come from allowing moments of vulnerability. And now, the world is paying close attention.